once again, welcome to another Lemon C64 play guide and review. This time we'll be checking out Power Drift. This was originally a Sega arcade machine released in 1988, and Activision ported this to the home computers in 1990. And so for this, let's check out the 1990 Activision release on the Commodore 64. It begins with some title cards with guys there that you can see from the actual arcade machine, and after a few title cards we get to the actual title, which doesn't contain any music, but at least they've gone to the trouble of drawing the Power Drift symbol on that screen. You can see the coder was Chris Butler and the music by Dave Lowe. By pressing that fire button, hopefully we can move on to the selection screen, and there are 5 races in the game which contain 5 stages. Pressing the fire button when the character is selected, he will then drop into the car. Each of the 5 races begins with an easy, a medium, a hard and extra hard, and so as you go through the stages you'll find them getting slightly harder. Let's just speed up this footage of the first level. We can see we can pass some cars. You can also see some graphics details on the side of the screen, like trees and signposts. And at the end of that lap we managed to get first position, and that means that we get a gold trophy you can see under our characters on that screen. Looking at the heads up display, it marks off the stage that we're currently on. This is stage 2 of 5 on the very first track, which is A, and this is lap 1 of 4. You have to get through 4 laps of every given stage, and so every one of these has to be driven full speed. We can also see the gear change is there. We're in high gear, and you only really need low gear if you crash and when you're starting up the race. And the top speed, 224 kilometers per hour. According to that, we are also in first position, and so all we need to do is to hang on to that first position. There are no bungee mechanics in this game, and once we're in first we can simply cruise on to the end and get under that line. The first few stages on any given race are not very hard, and it's there just to warm up the player, get them used to those controls. Also find different landscapes on the stages as well, and so we've moved on to something that resembles snow, although that doesn't affect the handling of the car one little bit, and we don't get any snow effects either. You can see all these buildings and all these trees. Sometimes they slow the game down, but you have to admit that this frame rate isn't too bad on a C64. This stage isn't too difficult as we go through to the 4th out of the 5 stages on this very first level. Well, the cars do get in our way a little bit, as does the track, and so you'll see me spinning off a bit more regularly. We'll be checking out most of these races in this play guide, and so we'll be checking out all of the landscapes. And this was recorded live in 2015 in April during the Lemon 64 Games competition, where I came 14th out of 19 competitors with the score that you're about to see at the end of this review. So this wasn't a particularly great try from me. These tracks do require some learning, and some of the heavy corners do require us to memorise them and gear down. If we can. And that isn't really a problem as long as there aren't any cars blocking our way on the road, and if they are, we'll spin off. As we enter this one, you can see the road determined to throw us off at that point, and when that happens the car will spin around on the spot, and that means you will drop a few places. Originally, this game was an NTSC machine because it was created by the NTSC dominant Sega Corporation in Japan, and then they ported it to NTSC dominant America, and Activision of America ported this, so if you're playing this maybe on an NTSC machine, that runs just a little bit quicker, 60 frames per second rather than 50, so you're squeezing in another 20% of extra frames in there, so it should be 20% smoother. And the CPU is a bit faster on an NTSC computer as well, so it should run a bit faster and smoother. I'm not sure if this is the PAL port or whether this is the NTSC version running on PAL, but it looks like a PAL port, and given that Chris Butler is also from PAL land, this would also be a PAL conversion. So they haven't done a horrible job with this. This is definitely a playable game, and it's even more playable than the Amiga version. At the end of that race, I made too many mistakes just before that line, so that means it's game over and we get to enter our name onto the high score table, and that's the first one ticked off already. Let's dive into B and select our driver for that. This footage was recorded a long time ago using Camtasia software, and some of the sound effects might be offline due to me converting this multiple times over the years. Now it's finally an MP4, but I've been putting off editing this review because editing 5 tracks, speeding all those up, it actually took quite a few years and quite a few attempts to edit all this thing down to finally get around to reviewing it. So I can't put it off any longer, I have to review this game. On this level we can see clouds in the sky, and all those are parallax scrolling. We don't get any parallax scrolling in the background either. We do get some huge signs, and huge signs are very special on C64 because the sprites on offer weren't really capable of massive things, and yet somehow this game provides them. If you remember, Pit Stop 2 had very small roadside items on the side of the screen. Super Cycle again had very small sprites to handle, and this has massive things that reminds us of Outrun, and we do get elevation changes as the road goes up and down, and without hundreds of logs in the way it doesn't slow down the frame rate either. So what Chris Butler has done is interpreted the arcade machine and is converted that onto a C64. It isn't a port, it's definitely a conversion, and the C64 conversion is definitely more playable than the Amiga conversion because, well, the Amiga had much more memory, much faster CPU, much better hardware, and the blitter chip, and they completely ignored that and they developed the 16-bit versions on the Atari ST instead. And the Atari ST, they could only get 6 frames per second out of it in PAL mode and 7 in NTSC, so that was then ported shovelward across to the Amiga version where it got 6 or 7 frames per second. And so the 64 version actually runs smoother and faster, and it runs better and is more playable than any other version virtually on any other machine except the arcade original. And this is an exceptional game. It's just that it does take a long time to load from the original cassette version. Of course, each one of these tracks has to be loaded individually, and I've cut out almost all of the loading time on this review. So that's another one completed. I came second, and congratulations, you've completed an entire run, and that means yet again we get to enter that name on a symbolically arcadey high score table. That means I'm number 1 on that chart, but that doesn't really hold us on good stead in the competition where you have to drive very cleanly. So let's move on to the third, number C. If we're looking at Outrun, this is Route C, and let's set off on stage 1. Of course, the Sega Corporation released one of the first colour driving games in the arcades, and they compounded that with games like Hang On and then Super Hang On. Sega released Outrun, and so this is based on the very same technology, and for my money this is better than the Outrun that we got on the 64, because look at the size of those palm trees. If we'd have got those palm trees on the original Commodore 64 version of Outrun, then it would have been impressive. And look at the speed of these turns. It really is a fast handling game and an impressive game when it comes to graphics and playability. Moving through, we get a night course where the colour palette has changed, but it's virtually the same game. But even to pack all of this game onto a cassette is great, and if this was released on disc, then that would be a much better way to play. Chris Butler also created Commando in 1985, where he created the code and the graphics, and he created the code and the graphics for this game as well. And the story about Commando that I learned recently is he only had a limited time, maybe a few weeks, to code the entire game and convert that from the arcade original. And he converted 4 entire levels from the arcade original into the C64 version, which would load in a single load. But when it came to Commando, they got some music at the last minute from Rob Hubbard, which was a huge track, and they wanted the entire score into Commando, so what they did was remove the very last level, and so we only got 3 levels in Commando, but we got the entirety of the Rob Hubbard music. For my money, that was the best decision that they could ever make, because the Rob Hubbard music really maximises the Commando experience, and even though there is only 3 easy levels in the game, it's still better to have that tremendous Rob Hubbard music. So an entire level was cut out, and that's why we got a missing level on Commando. Certainly wasn't Chris Butler's fault. They said it couldn't be done, so it moved on to Space Harrier, which they said it couldn't be done, and in 1987 they released that using the very same technology that we're using here. And then they said Thunderblade couldn't be done, so we moved on to Thunderblade after that, which has an overhead and a 3D perspective to it. And then they said this game couldn't be done, so it created Power Drift in 1990, and then after that they said a full fast turbocharging racing game couldn't be done on the C64, so we released Turbocharge in 1991, and that was a semi-big hit. It was way too easy for its own good. I completed it on the first day and took it back, but after that Turbocharge, Chris Butler seems to have disappeared into the work and is now involved in consultancy work for the modern games industry. Great music that you can hear is by Dave Lowe, otherwise known as Uncle Art, who really was the go-to guy for arcade conversion music on the 64 and also the Amiga, where he went on to Formula 1 Grand Prix on the Amiga, but also Power Drift as well. And Dave Lowe also worked on the game's Summer Edition on the Amiga and many games on the C64. So it's classic Dave Lowe music, and Uncle Art recently released a movie of his entire life, and that is a tremendous movie, which is well worth a watch. So if you can find the Untitled movie on the internet, then have a look at that. And you might have to pay for it because I don't think it's available anywhere. That's well worth a watch, and it's got great pixel art in there and great music and a great story as well. And he also released recently an album of music as well, which is reimaginings of his classic tunes, updated and modernised, and that includes the Elite 2, the Frontier soundtrack that he created for Frontier Developments, and the classic Elite 2 soundtrack is a monumental masterpiece which has been converted using a massive orchestra down at Abbey Road. So if you like Elite 2 and you like Dave Lowe's music, check out the album and of course the film as well. Fans of AVGN might notice that occasionally he talks to a green-headed woman monster that says, "Where did you learn to fly?" And that's actually Dave Lowe's wife, who did a cameo in another game. And so Dave Lowe's wife pops up every time AVGN decides to do a monologue with the woman that says, "Where did you learn to fly?" And the woman also has a name. If you look that up on the internet, I can't remember what it is, but that's another link to Dave Lowe. Code in this game is, well, nothing short of a masterpiece. There isn't really much to touch this on the C64 for massive graphic sizes and this elements of gameplay. We did get Super Cycle, we did get Pit Stop 2, and we did get, well, original Outrun. I don't think too much of Turbo Outrun, but I do have massive respect for Outrun Europa. And I would say Outrun Europa has massively more things going on the screen, and with the turbo it's even faster as well. So that game was the pinnacle, and for my money it ranks higher than Turbocharge. But for its day, 1990, this was big colourful graphics, big smooth sprites going on, big fast music going on, and great action as well. And for an arcade conversion, they could have made this a heck of a lot worse. And back in the day, we really did get worse arcade conversions than this on the C64. All things considered, the magazines thought that this was more or less a masterpiece as well, with the lowest score going to Ace magazine, who gave this 72%. And the Commodore User Group gave this 80%, Lemon 64 has given this 81 currently, the Commodore Format magazine gave this 81 as well, Commodore Force awarded this 85, Games Machine gave this 90, and Your Commodore gave this 92%, the highest score going to Zap magazine, who awarded this a fair enough 94%. I think if this had been released on cartridge, so that we could bang in the cartridge anytime we want and play any of the levels very quickly, then this would have got that high score, or at least if this was the disc version. On the tape, it really does take a long time waiting around for this to load, maybe even 20 minutes before you get to start to play this thing, going through the menus and everything. So, well, it feels like that at least. So for my money, it loses a few marks for that. They couldn't really do much better with the soundtrack unless they got Rob Hubbard involved, and then that probably would have been too big and they would have had to cut the game down to fit it in. So this is a mini masterpiece. It's not massively masterpiecey, but as far as Chris Butler games go, this really is up there with the pinnacle of what the C64 could do. Because don't forget, the C64 was released in 1982, and that thing was released as a home office and business computer, but it could also do sprites and colours as well for spreadsheets and things that moved around. And it took them a few years. 1988 was a long time after release, but finally by 1990 when this came out, you could do 3D sprite scaling effects, you could do parallax scrolling, you could do high speed, high frame rate graphics just like this with massive graphics and great music, and it didn't cut out the music and make way for the sound effects. So it all was possible, and that means the average score is 8.5 out of 10. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again sometime soon. Thank you.